Yasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Chari Jamuna Tira Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Nitya Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaur Hari Bol. Paramhamsa Parvacārya Stotra Srimad Bhagavatam 1.11.23 Srila Prabhupada ki. Prem Sukho Śrī Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Śrī Veda Gadadhara Sivasti Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Śrī Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Śrī Jiva Gopal Bhatta Das Raghunath Sat Goswami Bhuz Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. Vindi Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki. Śrī Vrindavan Dhama Ki. Mathura Dhama Ki. Śrī Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki. Śrī Mayapur Navadvip Dhama Ki. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki. All glories assembled devotees. All glories assembled devotees. All glories assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Naranam Namaskritya Naram Chaivam Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Dayam Udirayet Nastra Praeshu Vadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Yuttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Amagyanatamirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksuran Malitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. The Srimad Bhagavatam verse today is Canto 1, Chapter 11, verse 23. And svayaṁ cha gurubhir vipraiḥ sadāraiḥ sthavirair api āśīrbhir yujyamāno nyair vandibhiś puram svayaṁ cha gurubhir vipraiḥ sadāraiḥ sthavirair api āśīrbhir yujyamāno nyair vandibhiś cāviśat puram svayaṁ cha gurubhir vipraiḥ sadāraiḥ sthavirair api āśīrbhir yujyamāno nyair vandibhiś cāviśat puram. Yeah, Haribol. Sadāraiḥ sthavirair sadāraiḥ sthavirair āśīrbhir puram sthavirair āśīrbhir yujyamāno nyair vandibhiś cāviśat puram avitat āśīrbhir yujyamāno nyair vandibhiś cāviśat puram. Ladies. Svayaṁ cha gurubhir vipraiḥ sthavirair āśīrbhir yujyamāno nyair vandibhiś cāviśat puram Krishna. Okay. Svayam, himself. Himself. Cha, also. Gurubhiḥ, by elderly relatives. Vipraiḥ, by the brāhmaṇas. Sadāraiḥ, with their wives. Sthavirair, invalid. Api, also. Āśīrbhir, by the blessings of. Yujyamānaḥ, being praised by. Anyaiḥ, by others. Vandibhiś, admirers. Cha, and. Aviśat, entered. Puram, the city. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Then the Lord personally entered the city, accompanied by elderly relatives and invalid brāhmaṇas with their wives, all offering benedictions and singing the glories of the Lord. Others also praised the glories of the Lord. With repetition. Then the Lord personally entered the city, accompanied by elderly relatives and invalid brāhmaṇas with their wives, all offering benedictions and singing the glories of the Lord. Others also praised the glories of the Lord. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Brahmins in society were never attentive to banking money for the future retired life. When they were old invalids, they used to approach the assembly of the kings, and simply by praising the glorious deeds performed by the kings along with their wives, they would be provided with all necessities of life. Such brāhmanas were not, so to speak, flatterers of the kings, but the kings were actually glorified by their actions, and they were sincerely still more encouraged in pious acts by such brāhmanas in a dignified way. Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa is worthy of all glories, and the praying brāhmanas and others were glorified themselves by chanting the glories of the Lord. And the translation was, then the Lord personally entered the city, accompanied by elderly relatives and invalid brāhmanas with their wives, all offering benedictions and singing the glories of the Lord. Others also praised the glories of the Lord. Nam Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimati Jaya Pataka Swami Nisnamane Namo Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vicharine Nirvisesha Sunyvari Paschata Deshtarne Asri Prabhat. So, it's a wonderful pastime of Krishna entering Dwarka. And it's very nice to have this being read at this time, because soon Srila Prabhupada will be entering the TOVP. And Krishna entered Dwarka having just conquered the world. He just had the Battle of Kurukshetra, and this was the first time they had seen him for a long time. The last time they saw him leave, he was on his way to Kurukshetra for the Battle of Kurukshetra, and they didn't know if they would be seeing him again, because with Krishna's pastimes you just cannot tell. And he had a very small army. He'd already given his army away to the opposition, he'd promised that he wouldn't do any fighting himself. The greatest fighters had joined the other side, like Bhishma, who could not be killed. And you had Karna, who had invincible weapons. So when he'd left Dwarka, there would have been a lot of distress. And whenever there's a big war, many people get killed, wives lose their husbands, children become fatherless. And so now he was coming back after all that time, when people were living on a knife edge, not knowing what was going to happen. It must have almost been worse than when Lord Ram left Ayodhya. Although he was gone for a longer time, there was no immediate threat to him like there was to Krishna going to a huge fratricidal war where so many kings were involved. So it would have been a really huge occasion. And we can say that in his own very quiet way, Srila Prabhupada also, he left India to conquer the world. And his coming, the crown achievement, really, of so many achievements of Srila Prabhupada. And if you read Shamasundar's book, Chasing Rhinos with the Swami, it was just one achievement after another. But definitely, a crowning achievement of Srila Prabhupada has to be the establishment of this big temple, the TOVP. Although it's very quiet and we're here in Mayapur and we may not be so aware of it. His going to the TOVP on the 14th and 15th of next month is a hugely important event. And we're just, it's nice that we got this entrance of Lord Krishna into Dwarka to put it in a good perspective. So Srila Prabhupada will be going to the temple and installed, and after he's installed in the ceremony, he'll still be worshipped downstairs, but he'll be in the pujari floor, looked after on the pujari floor, I expect. And that is actually the start of worship in the TOVP. Very important time. And Srila Prabhupada did want to have a house made for him where the pukur is at one time, but those plans got changed. So now he's moving into his permanent residence. So here is Lord Krishna entering Dwarka, and all the inhabitants are there. There's some very interesting things in this verse. It's actually a difficult verse because it applies to Krishna at the same time as it applies to every king in Vedic times. A lot of the practices that are going on were traditional Vedic practices for any king. On top of that, Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you're seeing two different activities going on at the same time. One is a traditional Vedic practice, and one is a practice for Lord Krishna. And the Prabhupada separates those two in the Purport. The translation was, then the Lord personally entered the city, accompanied by elderly relatives and invalid brāhmaṇas with their wives, all offering benedictions and singing the glories of the Lord. Others also praised the glories of the Lord. And in the Purport, Srila Prabhupada says, the Brahmins in society were never attentive to banking money for future retired life. Also, you find this country people, the farmers and people like that in West Bengal, they're not banking money for their future retired life either. And sometimes if you see them lining up for work, the laborers are lining up for work. And if they get a job at the front of the line, they'll get a job. They're happy they got a job. And if they're at the end of the line and they don't get a job, they're happy because they can go home early and try again tomorrow. So it's very simple life. So the Brahmins were never attentive to banking money for a future retired life. When they were old invalids, they used to approach the assembly of the kings, and simply by praising the glorious deeds performed by the kings, along with their wives, they would be provided with all necessities of life. So, this is very interesting. Krishna provides us with all necessities of life. He also provides people in prison the necessities of life. He provides cockroaches the necessity of life. He provides swans the necessities of life. He provides everyone the necessities of life. So here, the Brahmins are singing his praises, and the culture is that by simply praising the glorious deeds performed by the kings along with their wives, they would be provided with all necessities of life. And of course the Brahmins are already worshipping Krishna in their home. So the question then is, and this is what we would think immediately, that sounds phony to us, that if I sing your praises, you're going to give me all necessities of life. So is the king a foolish person that is not able to see when someone is trying to get something from him? I mean, we all do it. When you want to get something from a superior, we say very nice things to them. And we go like this: I'm really your friend, Prabhu. And so the Brahmins and their wives were being described a verse of a higher culture where the Brahmins who are invalid and their wives, simply by praising the glorious deeds performed by the kings, they'd be provided with all necessities of life. Is that not a give me culture? So it's that's the first thing that comes into one's mind. And because it's the first thing that comes into our mind, it's the first thing Srila Prabhupada addresses in the Purport. And Prabhupada's answer to that is, such brāhmaṇas were not, so to speak, flatterers of the kings. But the kings were actually glorified by their actions, and they were sincerely still more encouraged in pious acts by such brāhmaṇas in a dignified way. There's so many nice points in this, but the key point, I think, in that is sincerity. And it's a wonderful word because of politics and leadership and democracy. We're very cynical. Everyone in the world is very cynical and mistrustful of leadership. And leadership do not inspire great sincerity. Some do, occasionally, there's some outstanding leader. But in world government, kings and leaders and politicians, it doesn't really inspire one's sincerity. So but here Prabhupada's answer to having a group of elderly Brahmins and their wives glorifying a king in order to get their retirement benefits. Prabhupada actually describes that this is actually not a cynical act on behalf of the brāhmaṇas and their wives, and it is not an example of a great person succumbing to flattery either. Prabhupada says, it's a very good one, because in this explanation of Srila Prabhupada, one's able to enter into the actual world of Vedic kings and their followers, and how this actually works in practice. Such brāhmanas were not, so to speak, flatterers of the kings. And obviously, Prabhupada says kings, deliberately. It's not just to Krishna. This is the culture. The brāhmanas were not flatterers of the kings, but the kings were actually glorified by their actions. What the brāhmanas would be saying would be true. They're saying them to the king, they're singing them publicly, they're glorifying him in public, so he will feel good. But what they're saying is true. Now, they're saying it true, and the king, he's hearing it. And he's hearing their sincere glorification. The kings were actually glorified by their actions, and they were sincerely still more encouraged in pious acts by such brāhmanas in a dignified way. So, this is very interesting, dignity. Everything is dignity. Prabhupada says somewhere, everybody needs some food, some clothes, and some, he mentions respect. Everybody needs some respect. And India, he says, Indian culture, it may be dead, but even a dead elephant has got great value. And you can see how in Indian culture there is so many cases that you do not experience in Western culture, that there's a tradition of respect. It's wonderful. So, the citizens are obviously naturally submissive to the king. And the king is glorified. Prabhupada says, actually glorified. What they're saying is true. And the fact that the king, when he enters a city, Krishna was accompanied only by the vulnerable members of society. He didn't enter the city with Arjuna and Yudhisthira and Bhima, Nakul, Sahadev. He didn't enter the city of Dwarka with those great kings. And he didn't enter them with his commanders. He didn't enter them with the commanders of Dwarka, who protected Dwarka. He entered the city with his elderly relatives and the sick elderly brāhmanas and their wives. And that itself is a beautiful arrangement to come in. You usually think, well, how did Krishna come into Dwarka? Even if you read this, you're thinking he came in on an elephant, and all the generals were around. The army would be marching. He'd have the artillery in the front. Actually, he enters the city with the city's vulnerable citizens. And that itself speaks very much of the nature of a Vedic king and how Lord Krishna likes things to be done. You don't overlook people. And he's giving respect to the elder members of society. The elder members of society were not able to be heroes on the battlefield. The brāhmanas had spent their lives in spiritual life, cultivating knowledge and giving advice. They weren't very famous. And some may have been. And certainly the wives would have served their husbands all the time. And Krishna enters the city accompanied by his elderly relatives, the invalid brāhmaṇas with their wives. And what message does that give to everybody? It means the king has time for me. I am part of this kingdom. And that's a wonderful thing. Citizens always have to be submissive to the state, whether the state is good or whether it is bad. If you go to Afghanistan now, they're hanging bodies in the main square because every government needs a submissive citizens. They've got laws in every country. So what's the difference? So you've got the citizens are submissive, and leadership should be merciful. And citizens should be able to trust and have affection for their leaders. And you can see that this entrance to Dwarka, coming in with his elderly relatives, not his young relatives, not his powerful relatives, but all the old geezers and their Matajis were coming in with Krishna, as long with the brāhmanas who are sick. Not even the healthy old brāhmanas, the sick old brāhmanas and their wives. So the king has time for me. It's important. And what were they doing? Is the king one of us? No, the king's not one of us. They were all singing the praises of the king who cares about them. So this is a thread of sincerity and a lack of cynicism, and without a touch of flattery, the affection between the king, who puts his citizens first, and the citizens who have great love for their protector, the king. So the Lord personally entered the city, accompanied by the elderly relatives and invalid brāhmanas with their wives, all offering benedictions and singing the glories of the Lord. And others also praised the glories of the Lord. And the whole tone of this immediately was given by Srila Prabhupada in the Purport. Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa is worthy of all glories, and such praying brāhmanas and others were glorified themselves by chanting the glories of the Lord. At the end of the Purport, Srila Prabhupada brings it back, not to the kings or the practice, but back to Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's another, but one very verse is, how do you encourage a king in pious acts? You don't have a vote, you can't vote him out. You can't overthrow him, you don't have the power. You want the king to become encouraged, to keep doing the good things he's doing, and let him know you value them. And that is done by glorification and valuable prayers. You don't go up to the king and say, the washerman in Ramachandra's, Lord Ramachandra's pastimes, the washerman didn't go up to Lord Ramachandra, to his assembly, and say, you've got that woman by your side. This is a disgrace. She was with Ravana for so long. Do you think he never touched her? I'm so embarrassed by you. You can't do that to a king. So what you do to go to the king is you offer prayers. O king, you are always surrounded by your noble Brahmins, and you would never associate yourself with an unchaste wife. You are the greatest king there ever has been. You offer prayers. And this is, Prabhupada's words are, the kings were sincerely encouraged in pious acts by such brahmanas in a dignified way. This is a very dignified way to nudge a superior into maintaining his good behavior. You take the things he's done well, you glorify him for them. This is all good culture. It's a wonderful verse. So this glorification of the king is a way to nudge him and affect his heart. And there isn't cynicism. There is sincerity. It's not flattery. You influence him by this glorification. And the king knows it, and the people know it, and it's done with sincerity. And it's a very wonderful pastime. Nowadays, unfortunately, with so many bad governments, if people are submissive, they take it as an opportunity to be cruel, and they cannot complain. There is if you've got power, that means you've got a range of people who are submissive. So if you've got a position of power, there's a book was brought out a while ago called 1984, where and this is he said, if you've got power, unless you can cause people to suffer, you don't actually experience your power, because anyone can be nice to other people. I don't have to have power to be nice to anyone. Here, would you like a pension? Yes. Here, would you like giving you things away free? But the only time you actually feel you've got power is when you say to somebody, stand on your head for 4 hours. If you don't, I will shoot you. Then you know you have power, because you're making people do things against their will. And unfortunately, a lot of people enjoy that. But in Vedic society, that's abusing the innocent citizens' submissiveness. So in the Vedic society, this is this is not part of the vulnerable people, and submissive is valued by the king, by the leaders, not abused. And the brāhmaṇas give the greatest value to society, because they keep all of society on a spiritual path. So you might say, why did Krishna not enter with his elder relatives and the workers in the field? So this actually, all of this... Oh, thank you, Mataji. Thank you. Mataji just gave me some for my dry throat. So the Krishna's entrance into Dwarka, this whole bit is to do with Vedic civilization and culture, and also therefore is very much to do with varnashram dharma, which is something that Prabhupada wanted to happen. So we've not covered it very much. I don't know much about it, but you can see that in all these dealings that we're watching, just from this verse, the softness of the dealings, and no harshness, the softness of the dealings between the leaders and the people. And in varnashram, not that I know much about it at all, we know we've got the 4 orders, Sudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, and Brahman. And of all those 4, all of them are engaged in advancing in spiritual life. That's what the orders are for. They're not a material management system. Society will naturally, for management, fall into those categories, or at least 3 of them. But when you got the Brahmanas there, and the Kshatriyas, and the Vaishyas and Sudras, all there, then everyone in society makes spiritual progress because of the Brahmanas. So, the most valuable people in Vedic society for everybody were the Brahmanas, because they enabled people at the time of death to not take birth again, or at least to take a better birth for more spiritual advancement. So they were giving the greatest benefit to society, which is a spiritual benefit, while the king was managing society so that everybody from every walk of life, even if they were prostitute hunters, even if they were drunkards, that in every walk of life, because you will get all sorts of people, they will all get the chance, and they will all definitely get a spiritual lift up in this life from wherever they are. So that's why the brāhmaṇas were the ones with him when he entered Dwarka. Not because he favored the Brahmins more than anybody else, although he does, but because everybody favored the Brahmins. They were the people who were giving the whole of society spiritual life. And he was honoring them, and all of the different orders of life would have been satisfied with his choice. Here is the king. He's taking the Brahmanas, who are the head of society, walking into society with them. They are elderly, they are invalid, they are vulnerable. And the women will be happy, the wives have gone with him. And he's taking his elderly relatives. He didn't take his famous ones and that. He's taking his superiors, his aunts, his uncles, his elderly ones. So the king is entering, Krishna was entering, this is another lovely point. He was entering Dwarka as a subordinate. He brought the superior Brahmins in. He brought his elderly relatives in who would look on him as their child and tell him what to do. And they were all singing praises to him. He is the king. It's a very nice entrance. So, and this was done with sincerity, not with flattery. So I think it is, let's look at another king. Something nice about flattery that Prabhupada writes. Here he's writing about Prahlad Maharaj, and this is about flattery, and Prabhupada extends the meaning of flattery to something even a bit more. And one thing I did always wonder about Prahlad Maharaj, it's a little bit beside the point, one thing I always wonder about Prahlad Maharaj, when he said to Hiranyakashipu, "My dear demonic father," what did he say? O chief of the demons. I was wondering, would his father take that as a compliment or an insult? Does anyone know whether Hiranyakashipu, when I think Prahlad Maharaj calls him, "My dear demonic father," I forgot what it says. Okay. No, I can't. "My dear father, best of the demons." Would his father have been happy to be called that or unhappy? So, let's have a quick show of hands. How many people thought Hiranyakashipu would take, "Oh, best of the demons," as being a compliment? "Oh, best of the demons." No? No. How many people think Hiranyakashipu would have taken that as an insult? Well, you've all got to put your hand up now. How many think that Hiranyakashipu would have been insulted by him saying, "Best of the demons"? One hand. Best of the demons. Yes, he was insulted. Yeah. He was insulted. So, here's Srila Prabhupada in the Purport, he says, "My dear father," he directly addressed his father, "My dear father, best of the demons." He addressed his father, is the best of the demons. "If I address you, best of the dogs, is that a nice thing? But if you think, oh, Swamiji addresses best, but best of what? Best of the dogs." And everybody laughs. So, in the Purport, Prabhupada goes on to talk about flattery. Here, and this is very interesting. Here, the father and son in the material world, they are addressing each other very nicely. But the father is sending the son to hell. And the son is also sending the father to hell by materialistic activities. A father is teaching, eat, drink, be merry and enjoy. Eat meat and drink and associate with many girls, and this is enjoyment. That means indirectly he is sending his son to hell. You see, there is no love. Actually, there is no love. If I help you in the matter for your ruination, there is no love. So Prahlad Maharaj did not flatter his father. That should be the attitude of a devotee. They should straightly speak everything truth. Prahlad Maharaj was asked by his father, "Oh, how are you so bold? You are a child, you are bold, you are talking before me so boldly. Where did you get such strength before me?" Immediately, "My dear father, from the same source from where you have got your strength, and you are so proud of your kingdom and material acquisition." So a devotee should always speak the truth. Oh, that is why Srila Prabhupada here talks about sincerity and the glorification of the elderly relatives and the invalid brāhmaṇas to Lord Krishna or to a king is very hard to understand. It's not flattery. It's part of culture, but it seems very like flattery. But they don't go up to the king and say, "Oh, Krishna, you are the greatest Lord that ever lived. So how come you gave your army away to Duryodhana?" So it's not flattery, but it's appropriate, and it's not lies. And that's why it's so hard to implement for ourselves in our own lives or in temple, because on paper it looks easy, but it's very hard to actually do in real life. So Srila Prabhupada said, half my work is done. And to implement Vedic culture like that, it's not easy. You can't just do it like that. It requires a change in heart. And it requires sincerity, dignity, glorification, pious acts, glorious deeds. Everything is so many different words in this small purport that it's practically unimaginable. But we can see that when Krishna did enter Dwarka, we can get a glimpse from Prabhupada's purports. Just like you can get a small taste of something, you can get a glimpse of a civilization, of a culture that's going to happen in this world, and that Srila Prabhupada inaugurated, and that it's going to spread from this great temple here somehow around the world. And a very important step is going to take place on the 14th and 15th of October this year, when Srila Prabhupada's Murti goes in. And all we can really do is continue to chant our rounds, try to do some service, not knowing what the value of it is, and let's try to bring some people to Krishna like Prabhupada wanted. There's a big book marathon going on, and do what we can and hope that our little efforts somehow help to bring the revival of Varnashram that Srila Prabhupada wanted, because only a small temple can only do so much. We can only fit so many people in it. But if you can have a nation establishing Varnashram again, if society can work so that the drunkards also get equal benefit, that they don't have to become full-time devotees. They can be like in the city of Dwarka, where you could have drunkards and prostitute hunters and everybody. I think the first people to meet Krishna were the prostitutes, actually. They were very much part of society. Among the first people to meet him. Let's look. We're also thinking for the opening of, for Prabhupada going to the TOVP. They were proceeding on various vehicles. I don't know if they actually were the first to see him. They were his unalloyed devotees. They were his unalloyed devotees. The only reformation that is necessary in society is to make an organized effort to turn the citizens into the devotees of the Lord. Not very interesting. Not to get rid of prostitutes, not to get rid of wine bars, because this material world is a prison. It's not Vaikuntha. The only reformation necessary in society is to make an organized effort to turn the citizens into devotees of the Lord, and thus all good qualities of the denizens of heaven will overtake them in their own way. On the other hand, those who are non-devotees have no good qualification whatsoever, however they may be materially advanced. And this is talking about the hundreds of well-known prostitutes. So this entrance into Dwarka opens up a whole world that we don't know about, of Vedic civilization. But Srila Prabhupada was happy if we can do what he said. He said the good qualities of the demigods will overtake them in their own way. That's amazing, isn't it? The quality of the demigods overtake them in their own way. How does it happen? It's a mystic process. What do we have to do? What did Prabhupada ask us to do? Chant Hare Krishna, serve the deities, take prasadam, practice Krishna consciousness, find some service, make ourselves useful, don't be envious. These work, and if we do those things by their own way, everything will happen. And already Srila Prabhupada has created such miraculous results. So we're just very fortunate to be in Mayapur at this wonderful time, when this big temple actually, it all starts on the 15th, when Prabhupada moves into the temple, because Prabhupada's behind it all. And it moves there. We'll be here, we're very lucky to be here, and watch Prabhupada's entrance into the TOVP. And look forward, by doing our bit. Maybe we cannot be a saintly king but we can do our bit to making a saintly king through practicing our Krishna consciousness. And the harder we play our part, the better it is for suffering humanity. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. It's now 12 o'clock. We've got a question. Hare Krishna. My hearing's very bad, so someone will have to repeat it. Okay, very well.
Yes. Thank you very much for the wonderful class, Prabhuji. Question is that were the brāhmaṇas only glorifying? Wasn't any negative feedback given to the king? Or how they gave, if at all, if they gave? Or they didn't give at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, they'd never say anything negative. Never, ever. He's the king. But that's why you'd wonder, would it be, and they were cultured people, they would never say that. That is why the question of flattery arises. And you don't speak, they wouldn't speak to a king in that way, that's culture. They wouldn't conceive of it. And the king, would be smart enough to know what they're saying. So that's why the question of flattery is mentioned in the purport, because they wouldn't say anything negative. They would only say the praises of the king. And that would work. The king hearing the praises, if he's done something bad, he would be thinking, because he's with these are the elderly brahmanas, and he's the king. He would be thinking, if he'd done something bad, he'd be feeling, whoops, I better not do that again. I'm getting so much respect. Everybody's watching what I'm doing. They're saying all these good things. I like it. And that's human nature. And that's also sincere. So he would respond in that way.
Another one was that are the brāhmaṇas, what do you call that? They were supposed to maintain the consciousness of the king. Was it their role?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class. Entrance into Dwarka, as you say, it's very significant for us because we are part of this movement that's going on. And the way you're explaining how it happens, the higher authorities know, but we can just follow in the footsteps of the authorities. But we understand that this entrance into Dwarka was made by Krishna. Krishna created this Dwarka and moved all the inhabitants of Mathura and everyone in there in one night. They created a city and moved all the residents of Mathura. They woke up in the morning and nice smell of the sea breeze is coming. Where are we? The ocean was there. They woke up in Dwarka city. So who constructed that temple? Vishwakarma. And similarly, who is constructing this temple? The TOVP. Because here also we have Shiva Ghat, Mahaprabhu Ghat, Madai Ghat, Bharakrona Ghat. Nityananda Prabhu said this is beautiful temple there. I think that's the one with 5 Shiva lingams, and the whole place is beautiful in that area. And this was also constructed by Vishwakarma. So we can understand that demigods are playing that in their part. It seems quite logical that Vishwakarma is, well, it is, of course, Nityananda said it. It is Vishwakarma. Yeah, so it's the transcendental desire of the Lord Chaitanya, this city be manifest. So all the demigods, everyone, they want to do some seva. I can tell someone had a dream, if you were accepting dreams. This was Padma Lochan's wife, Vrindavan Leela. She had a dream and she said she saw all the demigods and all workmen, some on bicycles and with some tools ready to work. Hordes and hordes are coming down to the TOBP. the demigods were saying, you're the earthlings, it's being built on earth, you've got to do it. But you have to start it, you have to get it going because you're the earthlings. So something like that. It was it coincided. Vishwakarma, he constructed these temples, so it seems very, very likely he's a Walker, Mathura, I guess he also. Anyway, we're lucky to be a part of it. It's the transcendental movement. Help to manifest this temple, and no more, as you say there. For the next 10,000 years at least. Haribol.
Oh yeah. In their own way, yeah. Okay. So we still have to do some work then. Okay. Okay. So the demigods are waiting for us to do the job. Yeah?
We have to do the work, as you said.
That's very nice, okay. So it's like Arjuna had to be the instrument of Krishna. So we have to be the instrument of action in this material world, down here. Okay. So thank you very much, Puji. Thank you. We'll but somebody does it. I don't think. Let's hope Krishna gives someone the intelligence, to understand all these things. That'd be good. Thank you very much, everybody. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna.